Why commitment feels risky now. The fear of choosing. For many people, the hardest part of life right now is not effort. It's choosing. Choosing a path. Choosing a direction. Choosing something and letting other options go. People delay decisions long after they have enough information. They keep researching. They keep waiting. They keep telling themselves they just need more clarity. But clarity rarely arrives, and the waiting stretches on. This is not indecision. It is fear. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of being trapped. Fear of committing to something that might collapse. Commitment used to feel stabilizing. Now it feels dangerous because commitment assumes a future you can rely on. It assumes that conditions will remain recognizable, that promises will hold, that effort will matter. And most people are not afraid of effort. They keep options open. They avoid finality. They delay commitment while telling themselves they are being responsible, flexible, practical. But beneath that flexibility is anxiety. Anxiety about permanence in an unstable world. This shows up everywhere, in relationships, in careers, in communities, in beliefs. People stay provisional. They participate partially. They commit conditionally. Just enough to function, not enough to be anchored. And this creates a strange tension. People feel unfulfilled, but also afraid of depth. They want meaning, but resist commitment. They want stability, but avoid permanence. This is not hypocrisy, it's adaptation. When the world teaches you that things change suddenly, you learn to stay mobile. You learn not to plant roots. You learn to keep exits available. That learning feels intelligent, but it comes at a cost. Because without commitment, life never quite begins. Everything stays tentative, reversible, light. This episode is not about pressuring people to commit. It is about understanding why commitment now feels like a risk instead of a refuge. Because until that fear is named, people will keep postponing their lives. Not because they are careless, but because they are trying to protect themselves from instability they didn't create. When promises became dangerous, commitment becomes frightening when promises stop feeling safe. Not because people no longer value loyalty, but because loyalty has been punished too often. For a long time, people were told that commitment would protect them. Commit to a path and it will lead somewhere. Commit to a role and it will provide stability. Commit to people and the ground will hold. Those assurances didn't disappear overnight. They are eroded quietly through reversals that were framed as temporary, through changes that were called necessary, through promises that were adjusted after the fact. People learned something very important. Not everything that asks for commitment deserves it. And that learning changed behavior. When commitments were honored, people leaned in. When they were broken, they pulled back. At first, they blamed circumstances. Then they blamed the leadership. Eventually, they stopped blaming and started adapting. They lowered their expectations. They shortened timelines. They avoided irreversible choices because irreversible choices had become dangerous. Dangerous not emotionally, but practically. They left exposed when conditions shifted. This is how commitment began to feel like a liability, not strength, not maturity, but risk. People began to notice that those who stayed flexible suffered less when things changed. Those who kept options open recovered faster. Those who avoided deep investment felt less betrayed. So, flexibility became wisdom. Detachment became self-production and self-protection. And commitment became suspect. This isn't cynicism. It is learning. People respond rationally to unstable environments. They don't double down. They hedge. They diversify. They delay. And they tell themselves they will commit later when things are clearer. But clarity rarely arrives in unstable systems. The conditions that made commitment risky also made certainty impossible. So waiting becomes permanent. People live in provisional mode. Always almost choosing. Always almost committing. But never fully stepping in. This affects relationships deeply. Because people hesitate to depend on others. They keep emotional exits open. They avoid promises that can't be easily undone. It affects work. People avoid long-term investment in institutions they don't trust to be stable. It affects belief. People resist anchoring themselves to ideas or values that might be redefined tomorrow. This posture feels safe, but it's also exhausting. Living without commitment requires constant vigilance, constant evaluation, constant adjustment. People are tired, not because they commit too much, but because they commit to nothing fully. The tragedy is this: commitment didn't become risky because people became weaker. It became risky because the environment became unreliable. And until reliability returns, fear of commitment will remain. Not as a flaw, but as a learned response to broken promises. Understanding the changes how we speak about commitment. It shifts the focus from moral judgment to structural reality, from blaming individuals to examining the conditions that taught them to be careful. And that understanding is necessary before commitment can feel safe again. Optionality as a defense mechanism. When commitment feels dangerous, optionality feels safe. Keeping options open feels like intelligence. Flexibility, adaptability, freedom. People tell themselves they are being prudent, that they are avoiding unnecessary risk, that they are staying ready for better opportunities. But optionality is not neutral. It has a psychological function. It reduces vulnerability. If nothing is final, nothing can fully hurt you. If every choice is reversible, mistakes feel less costly. If exits remain available, you never have to face the fear of being trapped. This is why optionality feels calming. It lowers the emotional stakes, but it also changes how people live. When everything is provisional, nothing is fully inhabited. People participate cautiously. They hold back effort. They invest partially. They stay alert for signs they should leave. This constant scanning creates tension. Even when nothing is wrong, optionality requires vigilance. You have to keep checking whether this is still worth it, whether something better exists, whether you should exit now or wait a little longer. So the mind never settles. It never rests inside a choice. It hovers above life instead of stepping into it. This hovering feels safe, but it is exhausting because you are always evaluating, always comparing, always preparing to move. Optionality protects against disappointment, but it also prevents depth. Depth requires risk. It requires staying after novelty fades. It requires enduring discomfort without escaping. When exits are always open, difficulty becomes a reason to leave. Instead of something to work through, this changes relationships. People stay emotionally guarded. They avoid full dependence. They hesitate to make promises that would make leaving costly. They keep part of themselves in reserve. It changes work. People avoid committing to long-term projects. They prioritize portability over mastery. They choose flexibility over depth. It even changes belief. People avoid anchoring themselves to convictions that might require sacrifice. Optionality feels modern, but it comes with a quiet loss. Life becomes shallow, not empty, just thin, because nothing is allowed to demand everything from you. People often confuse optionality with freedom, but freedom without commitment creates anxiety because meaning requires choice, and choice requires closure. Without closure, life never coheres. It remains fragmented, always tentative. This is why people feel restless, even when they have options. Why abundance doesn't satisfy. Why flexibility doesn't calm. Optionality removes pain in the short term, but it removes grounding in the long term. It prevents people from standing somewhere solid. And standing somewhere solid is what allows life to feel real. This doesn't mean optionality is always wrong. In unstable conditions, it is understandable, sometimes necessary. But when optionality becomes permanent, it stops protecting. It starts eroding. It erodes confidence, identity, purpose, because without commitment, you never fully know who you are or what you are building. Optionality feels safe because it postpones loss, but it also postpones meaning, and postponed meaning has a cost. One people feel long before they can explain it. The emotional cost of non-commitment. Avoiding commitment feels safe. Nothing is final. Nothing is binding. Nothing can fully disappoint you. But safety has a cost, and the cost is emotional. When people don't commit, they don't relax. They remain alert, always monitoring, always reassessing. This constant evaluation creates anxiety, not sharp anxiety, low grade, persistent. the kind that hums in the background of daily life. People feel restless even when nothing is wrong, because nothing is settled. Without commitment, decisions never end. Every choice stays open. Every path stays provisional, so the mind keeps working, second guessing, comparing, imagining alternatives. This mental motion is exhausting. It drains energy without producing resolution. People feel tired without knowing why. Non-commitment also weakens identity. Identity forms through action, over time, through choosing and staying. When people don't commit, they don't accumulate identity. They accumulate options, and options don't tell you who you are. They tell you what you haven't chosen. This creates uncertainty. People struggle to answer basic questions. What am I doing? Where am I going? What matters most? Because those answers require commitment. Without commitment, life feels vague, unformed. People describe this as feeling stuck or lost, but often they are not stuck. They are unanchored. Non-commitment also affects relationships. When people avoid commitment, they avoid dependence. They keep emotional distance. They hesitate to rely on others or allow others to rely on them. This limits intimacy because intimacy requires risk. It requires the possibility of loss. Without that risk, relationships remain partial, functional, but thin. People feel lonely even while connected, because connection without commitment does not satisfy the need to be known. Non-commitment also affects motivation. When nothing is binding, effort feels optional. People struggle to persist through difficulty, not because they lack discipline, but because the payoff is unclear. Why endure something hard if leaving is always available? This weakens resilience. People abandon projects at the first sign of friction. They mistake discomfort for misalignment. And finally, non-commitment affects meaning. Meaning emerges when effort accumulates, when actions connect over time, when sacrifices point somewhere, when commitment sacrifice feels pointless. Without commitment, sacrificing feels pointless. Effort feels arbitrary. Life feels episodic. People move from thing to thing without a through line. Busy, capable, but unsatisfied. This is the emotional cost, people. Not drama, not crisis, a quiet erosion. Anxiety without cause. Loneliness without isolation. Fatigue without overwork. People sense something is missing. They just don't connect it to the absence of commitment, because commitment has been framed as dangerous, as limiting, as naive. But without it, life never gathers weight. It never presses back. It never demands enough to feel meaningful. Understanding this is uncomfortable because it suggests that safety may be costing us something essential, and that trade is not always worth it. Why commitment creates meaning? Meaning does not appear before commitment. It appears because of it. This is one of the great confusions of modern life. People wait to feel certain before they commit. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel aligned. But meaning doesn't work that way. Meaning emerges after choice, after effort, after staying. Commitment creates a center. It draws a boundary around your energy. It tells you what matters and what does not. Without that boundary, everything competes. Attention scatters. Effort diffuses. Life feels noisy. Commitment quiets the field. It narrows focus. It gives direction to sacrifice. It allows effort to accumulate instead of dissipating. This is why commitment feels heavy. It gives weight to action. What you do starts to matter because it excludes other possibilities. You are no longer drifting. You are making a choice. You are choosing, and choice creates consequences. Choices creates consequences. Consequences create seriousness, and seriousness creates meaning. This is why people often say they want meaning but resist commitment. They want the result without the cause. They want significance without limitation. But limitation is what gives shape. Without shape, nothing holds. Commitment also creates continuity. It connects yesterday to today. It connects effort to outcome. It connects sacrifice to purpose. This continuity stabilizes identity. You begin to know who you are because you can see what you keep choosing. Not once, but repeatedly. Identity is not discovered by exploration alone. It is formed by commitment over time. This is why people often feel clearer after they commit, even if conditions remain difficult. The clarity does not come from certainty. It comes from coherence. Life begins to make sense because your actions align. Commitment also deepens experience. Staying with something long enough reveals layers you can't access from the outside. Relationships deepen after conflict. Skill develops after frustration. Faith matures after doubt, but only if you stay. Without commitment, difficulty feels like a signal to leave. With commitment, difficulty becomes information, something to work through instead of run from. This is why commitment builds resilience. Not because it makes life easy, but because it makes life intelligible. Effort has a place to land. Sacrifice has a reason. Pain has a context. People don't need certainty to commit. They need something stable enough to stand on. Commitment provides that stability, not by guaranteeing outcomes, but by giving life a center. And when life has a center, it stops feeling scattered. It stops feeling provisional. It stops feeling thin. Meaning grows where commitment holds. Not instantly, not effortlessly, but reliably. And that reliability is what people are actually seeking when they say they want a meaningful life. Relearning commitment in a fragile world. Relearning commitment does not mean returning to blind trust. It does not mean pretending the world is stable again. It means learning how to commit realistically inside uncertainty. Commitment today cannot look like it did before. It must be more conscious, more bounded, more honest about limits. The first change is scale. People don't need to commit to everything. They need to commit to something. One relationship they tend carefully. One responsibility they don't abandon easily. One practice they return to consistently. Small commitments restore confidence. They teach the nervous system that staying is survivable, that effort can accumulate, that continuity is possible. The second change is duration. Commitment does not need to be permanent. It needs to be sincere for a defined period. 6 months, a year, a season. Clear time boundaries reduce fear. They replace vague permanence with tangible structure. This allows people to step in without feeling trapped. The third change is expectation. Modern commitment must assume difficulty, friction, disappointment. Commitment is not a promise that things will be easy. It is a decision to stay engaged when they are not. When difficulty is expected, it stops feeling like failure. It becomes part of the process. The fourth change is honesty. Commitments should be explicit about limits. What can be offered? What cannot? What would require renegotiation? Clarity prevents resentment. Hidden expectations destroy trust. Clear limits protect it. The fifth change is presence. Commitment today is less about guarantees and more about showing up, being available, following through, remaining accountable, even when outcomes are uncertain. This kind of commitment builds stability from behavior, not promises. And behavior is something people can observe. Trust grows from observation, not assurance. Relearning commitment also means accepting loss. Every commitment excludes alternatives. Something is always left behind. That loss cannot be eliminated, only chosen. Choosing loss consciously is different from avoiding it indefinitely. Avoided loss becomes anxiety. Chosen loss becomes meaning. This is the paradox. Commitment reduces options, but increases life. It narrows the field, but deepens experience. People don't need perfect conditions to commit. They need conditions that feel honest, bounded, observable. That is how commitment can return without denial, without naivete, without pretending the future is guaranteed. Relearning commitment is not about courage alone. It is about design. Designing commitments that respect uncertainty while still allowing life to take shape. And when life takes shape, it begins to feel inhabitable again. Standing somewhere solid. You don't need to commit to everything. You don't need certainty about the future. You don't need guarantees. You only need somewhere to stand. When everything remains optional, nothing can support you. Life keeps moving beneath your feet. But when you choose one place to stand, even temporarily, the ground firms up. Commitment doesn't remove risk. It removes drift. It gives weight to your days, direction to your effort, shape to your life. Standing somewhere solid does not mean you will never move again. It means you stop hovering. You stop scanning endlessly for better ground. You allow yourself to inhabit where you are long enough for meaning to form. That meaning does not arrive loudly. It accumulates quietly through showing up, through staying, through accepting that something is worth your sustained attention. In a fragile world, commitment is not naive. It is stabilizing. It gives life a center, even when the edges feel uncertain. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. You only need the courage to stop floating and stand. Because when you stand somewhere solid, life stops feeling provisional. It starts feeling real. And real is where meaning lives. Thank you. transforming people's lives. The Kingdom Sanctuary of Eden and Outreach Ministries. With our clothing bins all over, we're collecting clothes and shoes and giving it out to all in the communities, in the cities, and all over the world. Wherever there is a need, the Kingdom Sanctuary of Eden is there to fulfill it. Please continue all your donations, whether it be clothes, food, shoes, or monetary donations, so we can take care of God's people all over the world. The donation starts with you. Let's build the kingdom together.